Hi everyone, here's the Bookchemist once again. A lot of you people in the comments to my videos have asked me to talk more about my PhD and my experience with it. And I've been thinking about what I can contribute, what I can say about my PhD that's gonna be helpful to you guys or meaningful. And a sentiment that I've heard from many people, many friends of mine who completed their PhD, and that I find myself harboring too, is this idea that once you finish the PhD, you feel just about ready to start a PhD all over again, and this time you will get it right. On the one hand, I think that's definitely just part of human nature and the human experience. Living life teaches you how to live life. And some days I feel that if you give me 1 or 2 more years, I might just about be ready to start high school and do it well this time. But on the other hand, I do think that the experiences you accumulate as you do your PhD might be helpful to people who are starting out right now or who are considering the idea of doing a doctorate, of spending a few years on a research project. So if you're one of those people, if you're considering a PhD, if you just started it, hopefully this video will contain some ideas, some points of reflection that might be helpful to you. All of these are definitely things that I wish I'd known before starting my PhD. As a small disclaimer, I did my PhD in English literature in the UK, so this video is going to be most relevant for people who are either considering or doing a research-heavy PhD, where a lot of the time is spent on independent research. If your PhD involves going into a laboratory every day for 3 to 4 years, some of these suggestions might not really make too much sense to you. If you take one suggestion away from this video, let it be to think really carefully before embarking on such a long and difficult project as a PhD, something that involves such a commitment in terms of effort, time, and sometimes even money. Before I started my PhD, I was talking a lot to people who had finished their PhD recently, maybe teaching assistants, people who were working in the university where I was studying at the time, and this idea that they all looked a bit grizzled and a bit shell-shocked, and the idea that they shared with me, lots of them, was this idea that again, you should really think carefully before starting a PhD, because your priorities when you're in your early 20s or your mid-20s, the age when most people are considering a PhD, are generally very different from your priorities when you're in your early 30s or even your mid to late 30s. That is undoubtedly true, but it's the kind of advice that's impossible to act upon, because if anything, the whole idea of being in your early 20s, the whole point of being in your 20s is that you're absolutely convinced that you will always feel the way you feel when you're 22, 24. You will always have the same dreams and the same ambitions. So to try and phrase this same advice a little differently and to try and make you think about it under a different light, I would put it this way. I think academic life is a very noble and fairly fascinating pursuit, and I would advise anybody who is academically inclined to consider it, but only if that is your main goal and your main dream in life. Because you should know that academic life and academia are all-consuming pursuits. Because academia is such a competitive field, because it moves so fast, and because there are so many, oh my god, so many really talented people struggling for the few positions available in this field, you will always have to go above and beyond what's required of you, even just to have the faintest hope of making it in this career. You will always be thinking about your next paper, you will always have 1 more book and 1 more article to read, or more likely 50 more books and 100 more articles. You will always be coordinating your next panel at an academic conference, while also applying for a travel grant, applying for your next position, and trying to write a chapter for a book because you've been invited by a colleague to contribute to a collection of essays. For all of these reasons, academia is not really something you can do as your plan B, something to fall back on in case your songwriting or your YouTube channel do not work out. The people I've met who are successful and happy in academia are people who are maybe as frustrated as the rest of us with the liberalization of universities, with how precarious the working conditions for young researchers are, but who are still happy to be working in the field because that was always their dream. They're basically doing what they did as teenagers, reading books and obsessing over books, except that now somebody's paying them for it. My mistake, I think, was to treat academia as a plan B. My main dream, my main ambition in life was and is to be a fiction writer, and I had this idea that academia would be my day job, something that would pay the bills and would leave me the space to focus on my writing, my stories, my novels, whatever. Far from it, far from the truth. If I look back at the 3 years of my PhD, I realized that I produced much less, both quantitatively but even qualitatively, in those 3 years when it came to my writing, than I did in the years before the PhD or in the years after the PhD. And that's even considering that for those 3 years I was master of my own time and I could handle my days, organize my days as I saw fit, even so the demands of the PhD and of developing my academic profile were always and inevitably weighing on me. Personally, maybe because of the way I'm wired, I'm finding that having a day job is actually a much better prospect when it comes to balancing it with my passion. When my working hours are done for the day, I know that I've done my part, I can step away from it, and I can focus on my passion, I can focus on my writing in all liberty. Even more precious, I think, is the fact that I can finally read whatever I want. I can read whatever obscure Italian novel from the 19th century, whatever horror comic book strikes my fancy, because I'm not constantly thinking that this book I will have to, because I'll have to turn it into an academic paper, or I'll have to cite it in my research, I'll have to somehow use these readings to advance my academic career. That freedom alone, to me, is completely priceless. Now, I've described this scenario where you might have academia might be your plan A, your dream in life, or it's just a plan B, something to fall back on. But for many of you, you might be in doubt. You might not be sure whether academia is your dream or not, whether that's really what you want to do. And I think that's fine. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with pursuing a certain career, even if you're not convinced that it's gonna become your life for the next 4 or 5 decades. It's natural to be in doubt. It's completely fine. But obviously, it's all the more fine to pursue this path, even if you're not certain it's what you want, if you're not actively investing a lot of money into it. If you get a scholarship for your PhD, which means you don't have to pay any fees for it, or even better, if you get paid for your PhD, even just a relatively small stipend, that's obviously all the more okay, as opposed to the idea of sinking quite a lot of money and making your student debt so much larger so that you can chase this potential goal. If the PhD you're considering is going to have a strong financial impact on your life, then I think you should consider it 10 times more carefully than if you were receiving a stipend for it. It sounds silly and it sounds really obvious, but I still want to stress it because it's really important. Now that that is out of the way, I'm gonna give you a few tips for those of you who have actually started their PhD, or maybe are going to start it in the autumn or maybe next year. Just a few things I wish I'd known. The main one is that you should try your hardest to create a little bit of a community around yourself. Find yourself a few contacts that you can rely on. I am the most introverted person I know, and I am at my happiest when I'm home alone just reading my books. And yet even I found the PhD life quite isolating and quite difficult to cope with at times. Because you'll be focusing all your attention on this research project, on this very specific topic on which you'll become the world expert. Nobody is going to care as much as you about this one handful of authors or this one period in history. Other people will not get it. Other people might not even get why you're bothering doing what you're doing. All of that is quite isolating, and it can lead very easily to burnout. That's why I think that even if you think you're very comfortable just being independent, dealing with your own research, I still think you should take advantage of the networking opportunities that universities tend to offer, so that you can connect with other people who are also studying for their PhD, are also graduate students, and who will know the same struggles, will be going through the same difficulties that you are. Trust me, even just having one or two people that you can talk to every once in a while is going to make all the difference. And that, by the way, strangely, is a suggestion that also applies to home working, quite a different situation. I started home working during the pandemic after spending a few months, almost a year, working in an office. And although I was thriving in that environment, and I still love home working very much, burnout can creep up on you. That feeling of isolation can creep up on you, even if you don't think that it's gonna do that. And it is always important to have some kind of social web and to know that you can rely on friends, you can rely on people when the need arises. Connected to this point and connected to this idea of networking, use academic conferences to the full. When you go to a conference, attend as many panels as you can, reach out to people whose papers you liked, whose papers you thought were intelligent and stimulating. Go to the conference dinners. If there are tours of the city where the conference is being held, if the organizers are putting together these types of touristy tours, go on them, reach out to people and create your own network. Because a lot of opportunities will come out of it. People will remember you when it's time to invite you to contribute maybe a chapter to a book or an article to a special issue. And because it's just part of being a good citizen in the academic world. When I was doing my PhD, for my first few conferences, I was actually really bad. I would show up at the conference, give my own paper, maybe attend one other panel, and then I would just leave. But it's just a waste of a conference. It's a waste of travel and a waste of a good opportunity, and it's just fairly antisocial, I'm afraid. You might dread the sheer idea of chatting to strangers at a buffet lunch, but the truth of the matter is chatting to strangers at buffet lunches is a big part of academia. Networking and that social dimension is incredibly central to making it and progressing within academia. And if that's not a side of it that you're comfortable with, you'll have to work on it, because it's hard to stress how important these types of connections are going to be to your career. Moving on, don't buy those expensive academic tests. No matter how central you think that Narrative as Virtual Reality 2 by Mary-Laurie Ryan is going to be to your research for the rest of your life. 5 years from now, you won't be touching that book at all, and you'll regret having forked out £30 to buy it. I can guarantee you though that 5 years from now you will wish you still had £30 more in your pocket. So rely on your library. Don't buy the academic books. Finally, a really tricky but a really important one. Train yourself to think about the practical applications of your research, how your research relates to the questions that people are asking at the moment and to the problems that the world is facing at the moment. This concept, thinking about the usefulness of research, was something that I really struggled with when I was doing my PhD. I found the notion actually quite offensive. Obviously, I'm studying the books I'm studying because they're good books. It's preposterous and capitalistic to ask anything more of me. And in many ways, I still think that. I think that studying great art and great culture is a valuable pursuit in itself. And it's a sign of the advancement of our civilizations that we regard these things as important and valuable. At the same time, though, this research does not happen in a vacuum. That is true. And it always has an impact on how we think about certain writers, certain artists, certain historical moments. And it's important to be aware of that, even just because it's going to make your career advancement all the more easy. When you've finished your PhD, when it's time to apply for a postdoc, to apply for a research grant, government institutions, research panels, funders, all of these people are going to be all the more interested in your research. Yes, even your research in the humanities, if you can demonstrate that it has a direct connection, as I said before, with maybe a topic that lots of people are interested in these days, something that informs the social debates and the social conversation that's going on in the broader world outside academia. For instance, if you're studying a lesser-known Victorian author, maybe you have something to say about how your understanding of this author actually shines a new light on a historical period that's highly stereotyped and that we thought we knew everything about. Or on the other end, you might have something to say about the process of creating canons and why certain authors are excluded from these canons and reading lists by people in a position of power. If you're studying comic books from the American 1950s, you probably will have something to say about censorship and about the way censorship works to maintain the status quo, to sustain certain cultural views. You'll have to learn about spinning your research, even if you're just studying these things because you like them, to turn all of this into something that relates to the broader world. Academia is very much a game with its own rules, and this video only touched briefly upon a few of them. I'm not the right person to teach you how to succeed in academia, but I definitely wish that I'd known these things before I started, or for those things that I kind of already knew, I definitely wish that I'd considered them a bit more. I hope that it was useful for you. It was even just a bit stimulating, a bit interesting. If you're doing your PhD or you recently finished it, I would be really curious to hear about what are some of the things that you wish you'd known before you started, and that you think would be useful to know for new people who are going to try their hand in the field. And as I said before, after finishing my PhD, even though at the moment I moved to a completely different field, I would say that if you're thinking about it, if you're, if that's your dream, I would say go for it. I'm not the kind of jarred former PhD who says, oh, academia is hell, don't even bother, the game is rigged. I don't think it is. I just think it's really, really difficult. So if you go into it clear-eyed and with a clear sense of what it's gonna take, best of luck, guys. We do need good scholars and good researchers to advance our understanding of art, the world, ourselves, history, and anything in between. I've been rambling for quite a lot, so thank you so much for watching the video, and thank you as always to my patrons for supporting the YouTube channel. Bye everybody.